It's going slow. Do it.
This is D.W. Wilber, and welcome to the Break It Down Show.
D.W. Wilber is comes to us via Michael Broderick, and it's a nasty echo in this thing. Can you turn that thing down at all? Your speaker? You're not hearing me.
See if this ain't better.
All right, we'll try that. Okay. There's still an echo. We're going to have to deal with it. All right. This is D.W. Wilber. He's a buddy of ours, and he comes to us via Tim Abel and Michael Broderick and those guys. They, the character Dell in Fathers and Sons, that short video for the Terminalist Jack Carr short that they made. Dell is in honor of D.W. here, Dell Wilber. And so I guess let's just start there, man. When they come to you and say, hey, we want to do you this honor of naming this character after you, what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, it was pretty cool. It was a surprise, naturally, but it was kind of cool, and watching and certainly having Tim Abel as the character using my name. I thought that was he and I resemble each other so much. I mean, the hair and everything. So, but it was cool. It was good.
I guess for the audience's sake, if you happen to not know who Dell is, here is the link to his website. He is an author and has written a lot of stuff for Town Hall and a variety of locations. But I think the thing where we should start is the fact that you were an undercover CIA counter-terror agent. I guess it's probably the best way to describe it.
Yeah, I mean, I worked for the agency for a number of years, and overseas, of course, I served overseas in undercover capacities. They don't send anybody overseas as an overt, employee. But I worked in Eastern and Western Europe and the Middle East. And so I jokingly say I was also a cop for about 10 years. So I'm kind of a dual threat. I can be an intelligence officer as well as a police officer, and probably screw up both, equally as well. So.
I had to finish typing something. And if I stop and I push the mute button in the middle of typing, it erases stuff. I guess let's spend some time there, because obviously I'm a counterintelligence agent. I've got a lot of time in Europe. I've got time in Afghanistan and Iraq. We overlap a lot. We probably have been on the same camp, if not in the same room, at some point during our careers, including maybe even Bosnia. What years were you in the former Yugoslavian states?
I was there in 2013.
Oh, okay.
And I was over there on a State Department program, or actually it was a combination State Department, Department of Justice program. I was the Counterterrorism Advisor to the Bosnian, basically the FBI/CIA, and working with them on counterterrorism efforts inside the former Yugoslav Republic.
When people hear that kind of work, I mean, would you say, so you're sort of in the same world as me? Like, sometimes people will peg me as a contractor, but really what I am was professional level capacity flexed in a variety of areas. For a while, I was in the Army. And then for a while, I worked as a DA civilian. And then sometimes I worked on a specific intel contract, filling a specific line item. And it was always counterintelligence collection focused. But if you were to say, I can't say I'm retired Army, because I'm not. I wasn't even long enough to do that. You couldn't say I was a contractor, because I was only on the contract for a few years. You couldn't necessarily say I was a DA civilian, but you could absolutely say I was a spy, because I left the camp all the time and talked to locals. How do you characterize your experience?
Well, in Bosnia, I mean, I was overt there. I was, again, working on like I said, the DOJ program. And so the Bosnians that I dealt with on a daily basis, I mean, they were certainly, familiar with my background. In fact, they received a copy of my resume before I ever went over there so that they knew, who they were dealing with and what my experience and level of expertise was. And so, I mean, it actually was an enjoyable experience. They were very interested and open towards, having someone that, that was there to try to help them out with some of the issues that they were dealing with. Most people don't probably don't even realize that back in the early 90s, when the Bosnian War was taking place between Bosnia and Serbia, there were a lot of Wahhabis that came from Saudi Arabia that came to fight, for the Muslims, the Bosniaks in Bosnia, and uh, a lot of them stayed after the Dayton Accords ended the war, and the peace kind of more or less came to the area, though it's still simmering right below the surface. But a lot of those Wahhabis just years when I got there, they had to kind of assert themselves a little bit, and Bosnia was starting to experience some acts of terrorism and had some bombings against local police stations and things of that nature. So they were concerned about trying to keep a lid on that type of activity and not let it get out of hand.
Yeah, when you do our kind of work, you're oftentimes chasing a potential threat. And I would see if I can say this fairly to everybody who works above the ground level where you're trying to check things. It's like they spin the wheel for threat of the week. This time it's going to be a car bomb hitting the mayor's office, and it's like, well, there's nothing out here indicating that because they're good at hiding it or it doesn't exist, and so you're always sort of chasing this negative. And I found that if I was conscious of what the threat up higher was perceived to be, but I kept my mind open to what it was on the ground, I was a lot more successful at giving the commander information he didn't otherwise have. And a lot of times it wasn't even threat based. It was more like, you're losing right here. This is a problem right here. This specific system is not working the way that you're likely being told. Is that important to you? And so I would say the vast majority of the collection I did, I mean, every day going out, getting something that no one else knew, the vast majority of it was non-lethal, which ultimately, I would say, increases the stability of an area if you're able to if we're less of a problem outside in the villages and everything else, everybody's a lot happier and there's a lot less conflict, except for on the days when there's not.
Yeah. I did an awful lot of training. In fact, I did quite a bit of traveling around Bosnia and into the autonomous Republic of Srpska that was created out of the Dayton Accords. And I met with their local or regional, police chiefs and members of the SIPA, which was the State Investigation and Protection Agency, their FBI. And I did a lot of presentations, for them on terrorism and things that hopefully would help them in recognizing threats and conducting investigations into potential problem areas. And one of the other things I did was actually created a terrorist threat reporting mechanism for the country, which ultimately was actually adopted by their legislature and was put into to effect. And it's the kind of a reporting mechanism where people can, just like we have in this country, we've got our CT officials that are constantly saying, see something, say something. Well, this was, kind of along those lines, but it was much more detailed, and it provided real detailed information that typical people might not recognize as a potential terrorist threat. Someone buying a lot of chemicals or something, for no reasonable purpose, and because it doesn't go along with their profession or their needs or whatever. And those are the kinds of things that I put into this document that would try to help people recognize, like I said, what might be a potential problem. And anyway, it seemed to be pretty well received by the Bosnian government, and as far as I know, it's being used to this day. So.
One of the things when you work with Bosnians versus, I would say, like Middle Eastern folks, is there's just a lot more stability and security in a place like the former Yugoslavian states. Electricity is more like right now, literally at my house, the power is out for the next few hours because they're replacing a power pole in our neighborhood. And so for the next 4 hours or so, there's an announced power outage, right? But if you go to Iraq, Baghdad, I mean, one of the biggest cities in the world, you don't know when and where, for how long or how sustained your power will be. And that's just infuriating, to the people there. It drives you crazy. It's 100 something degrees outside. You can't run an air conditioner. You can't run a fan. You don't have an electricity. And I know you'll appreciate this, Del. I had an Iraqi farmer say to me, "Hey, how long would your government operate without electricity?" And I, had to basically say, about 8 minutes, because we would lose our minds. And that's one of the things in these conflict zones. It's stuff like electricity that really drives people bananas because they can't do anything reliably. And it's a huge exasperating factor for all of these things.
Well, a case in point is what just recently happened in Texas during the freak cold spell they had down there. Power was out for hours at a time in certain locations. And, I have a daughter that lives in Texas, and, they lost power for about 8 hours, suffered some, and they were actually on the lucky side. There were other places the power was out for quite a bit longer. I live in the Midwest, and, we're kind of in thunderstorm and tornado alley. And so it's not uncommon for us to lose power for 4 or 5 hours. And, we've become used to it because it happens, with fairly regularity this time of year, especially. So, you cope with it and you deal with it. But, there's a lot of people that live in high density areas, maybe in the, large cities or whatever, living in apartment complexes. And, and they lose power. And literally, they're stuck in elevators. They're, they can't, if they live on the 40th floor, they're walking up flights of stairs. You name it. So it's, what you said is really true. We have become very, very dependent upon electricity, and our enemies in the world know that too.
Yeah, and that's a great counterterrorism point. I want to bring that up in a second here, but I want to spend another moment just in this. And you're illustrating a great thing. In Texas during the storm, they were filling their bathtubs with water because something that's just taken for granted every day, fresh water running in your house, is so exceptional in so many parts of the world, that it instantly becomes valuable when you don't have access to it. And you're willing to fill your tub and garbage cans full of water, because you don't know when you'll have it again. And these things are not norms in Iraq or Afghanistan. And heck, I would imagine even in parts of like the Yugoslavian states, it's not guaranteed that they have an indoor water supply. And that's just one little small thing. Yeah, the thing I wanted to mention too about the counterterror part, I want to get into counterterrorism. And you said in your bio that you're an undercover agent. I think we should spend a moment there talking about what undercover means, because I don't think that the audience understands that. Like, we all hear it and we go, ooh, sexy and exciting, but what does it mean when you're undercover?
The agency, in most cases, they do not have overt employees overseas. They couldn't function, for one thing. They wouldn't be very successful at their job if everybody knew that this person's a spook. So the agency has agreements between other government agencies and that provide cover positions, basically, for agency employees who are serving overseas. I spend my time partly under Department of Defense cover and Department of State cover. And I'm not giving any secrets here or anything, because that's something that's well known. But anyway, as I said, you're not going to be very effective in your job if you go overseas and everybody knows you're a spook. So that's in essence what it means, is you're serving, undercover. You're not an overt employee. A lot of the employees, agency employees that work at headquarters in Langley are overt. They can put down on a credit application or whatever who their employee, who their employer is, that they work for the agency. The agency will acknowledge their employment in that. And they're overt. They're not going overseas to work, they're working maybe in an analyst job or something, or some other support position at the agency back in the U.S. So there's no need for them to be serving in an undercover capacity. But again, those of us that do travel overseas and work, in a foreign environment, it's pretty much standard, because you're not going to be effective, and also you're a target. You're an American target anyway. You're a target overseas for terrorist organizations if you're an American anyway, but they love to be able to get their hands on an agency employee that would be even, kind of a feather in their cap. So, it's like I said, you want to, try to limit your exposure as much as possible for counterterrorism's sake.
Yeah, and let's spend a little more time here because I'm on the opposite end, right? As an Army person or a Department of the Army civilian, I'm not provided a cover. And the most I can do is say I'm with American Security or something, And so I would take the other tack and be overly overt. Like I'm absolutely here to ask questions. I'm absolutely going to try to keep people safe because that is the paradigm that I work under. It's different, this is for the audience more than for you and I. It's different for CIA folks because they have a different mission. I'm oftentimes running around with the platoon. And so my permissibility is their lethality. And so I walk around with those guys. And so it's different. A CIA person isn't afforded a platoon to go walk around or, all these different protections that are in place. It's a different mission. So for me, I am overt because I know that the villagers already think that. Who is this guy? Why is he asking these questions? And I try to get to know them and build trust. And I build trust by being honest on why I'm there. But I also say to them, if I ask you a question you don't want to answer or you feel it's dangerous to you, don't answer it. Like I'm never going to put you in any extra danger. And that is always, and maybe I'm the only person that does that I know of, but that's always worked for me, Del, was to be overt about my overt collection because it doesn't pay me to be dishonest because my main currency when I'm outside the wire is trust.
Well, I mean, absolutely. You've got, but part of that, how an agency, a case officer that do their job is also developing that trust. And I mean, there's a lot of things that go into being an operations officer overseas and that, which a lot of it I can't can't really discuss in that, but suffice it to say that as in any relationship, whether you're a police officer dealing with an informant or the example that you gave for yourself, in order to get people to feel comfortable and want to work with you, want to cooperate with you in that, there has to be a level of a relationship has to be developed, and it has to include a level of trust. I mean, that's just a fact of life. If they don't trust you in that, they're not going to have anything to do with you. So that I think is probably more important, and in particular when you think about it, someone who we're trying to recruit to spy for us against their own country, they're putting their lives in your hands, basically. So they're not going to be too confident of doing that if there's no level of trust that's been developed between you.
Yeah, and we're getting into the danger zone in terms of classified things. We're not going to talk about anything classified, everybody. Just so cool your jets. But you're right. If I'm going to recruit somebody to be a source for me, then I had better have established. I better know who that person is, why they operate, what their goals are. So that they know that I have their best interest in mind. Because I need to know what their motivation. You need to know so much about them. You don't just show up, and you have to develop this person. You have to develop a real relationship, so that if anything does get sideways, which it inevitably will, you're already ahead of the game because you spent a lot of this time on the front end. It doesn't do anybody any good to recruit a source and then have them get killed the next day because you have been reckless. And on my side of things, you have to move fast. You have to be tactical. You have to have reports on the commander's desk all the time because the battlefield moves too fast. But but when it comes to source operations, I just don't know that you can do it much faster than the CIA folks do, because it's too dangerous for everybody involved. The area is not permissible. And a lot of times I don't think it's permissible enough to even try to run sources. Anyhow, I don't want to get us too to the edge with classification, but what is in terms of like the caring for the source and those kind of things?
Well, it's there's too much at stake. And I'm talking about beyond just your personal safety or the safety of the people you work with, but your national security. There's just too much at stake to go to cut corners, to take chances or whatever. There are times probably when information is time critical. Perhaps it has something to do with an attack against a U.S. installation or something that's planned. you don't have a lot of advance notice in that. So there may be occasions where you have to take that time limitation into consideration, and you may adjust your tactics a little bit. But those occasions are few and far between, and then you're going to even then you're going to factor into your planning contingencies for, well, what if this is all bogus information? What if this isn't true? What if this is to an attempt to draw us out or whatever, or to set us up for something else. So these are the kinds of things you have to think about continually when you're assessing whether or not information that you've received is true and accurate. So I mean, it's definitely not it's not an easy job. I'll say that it's not necessary. You know.
Yeah, it's not an easy job. It's a dangerous job, and it's a job that is dangerous not just for you, but for your friends, and also trying to work without. Do I got you?
Yeah, I've got you now. I lost you there for a second.
I was just saying, in terms of security, being able to measure what's reasonable, what works, and keeping in mind that not only are you trying to be safe, you're trying to keep your friends safe, and you're also trying to keep the people outside the wire safe. Because if somebody outside the wire is getting killed because of your collection efforts, that creates chaos in that family, in that tribe, in that set of people. Because, hey, Pete showed up, and all of a sudden things got sideways really fast. You're not going to be an effective collector. You'll never know this, but you won't be an effective collector from then on. And then you have to always ask yourself, it's a thing I always say to young agents, who's running who, right? You have to always assume that you're being run, and you have to look at it that way, because you're making mistakes you can't realize. And in our world, it's easy to be arrogant and have a big ego and think, I mean, Dell, if we were to go around and ask, human collectors, if they're, how would they rate themselves on a scale of 1 to 10? There'd be a whole lot of 9s and 10s in the room, and not many 3s and 2s and 4s.
No, I mean, it's true. Like I said, that's one of the things that I always, was my practice, or whatever, was self-evaluation. It's easy to fall into that trap where you become, confident in your abilities, which is a good thing to have. You don't want to be out there and be indecisive and lack that confidence in what you're trying to do in that. But you got to be careful not to become, arrogant about what you're doing and how you're doing in that, because when that happens, then that's when you're going to make mistakes, and when you're going to perhaps cut a corner because you think that you're better than you are. You're better than the training you received, better than the information and that you've developed thus far, and that's when, like I said, when mistakes are made, and our mistakes not only impact us, but they potentially impact all the way up to the White House. I mean, they may reach the levels, the highest levels of our government, if we're not careful in what we do. So that's in essence, that's our job, is to collect information, to provide to the decision makers, to help them in formulating what our national policy is. And, so you got to be careful in how you do that.
Yeah, you do, especially in the counter-terror world, because they're always plotting and planning in a way that you're not supposed to know about. They're trying to not be detected, and your job is to be so pervasive with your network that they're always going to be detected. And it's this fight between detection and non-detection. And meanwhile, again, you can't piss in the pool so much that nobody wants you at the pool party, and that is so easy to accomplish. And you're right. I think about when I measure, like, when I'm doing things, I try to think, how would I run me right now? And I always start with ego. Like, is my ego being stoked? Am I being placated in some way? Is someone lowering my threat assessment so that I feel safer than I really am? and I'm able to judge where I need to be because I've done it a lot. But if you're a young agent, if you're a young collector, and you're trying to decide who's running who, and then what operation, what would they be doing? Like ego up, ego down, super simple. With the, I mean, that's what I would try if I came across you and we were on opposite sides of the, opposite teams. I would be trying to see if I could simply get an advantage over you by working your ego, whether it was stoking it or smashing it and seeing how you responded. I mean, that's one of the basic levers that any seasoned spy almost wouldn't even bother with another seasoned spy. But with younger people, I think it's really easy to do. That's where I would start.
Well, yeah, I mean, people like to have their ego stroked. They like to hear about themselves. They like to, to be complimented. I mean, one of the things, like I said, I travel around the country and do a lot of presentations before different groups on counterterrorism and insurgencies and those kinds of things. One of the first things I tell people, and they oftentimes, when I'm introduced in that, they'll go over my bio a little bit, and then they'll say he's a counterterrorism expert, and I always correct them, and I always say the only terrorism experts out there are the ones doing it. Yeah. Because they know exactly what they're going to do, when they're going to do it, and where they're going to do it. And usually we're left in their dust trying to catch up. So, I guess you have to have a level of to be a little bit humble when you're doing this kind of work, because the second you become too arrogant, or the second you become a little bit overconfident, that's when you have the rug pulled out from under you, and that's when bad things happen. So.
Yeah, you become exploitable, and that ego will absolutely bite you in the ass. Hey, we got Tim Abel coming into the studio with us. Tim, what up?
Hey, Jess. Sorry, I'm late. I was just reading this outstanding book here.
Well, that looks like Bell's book.
Here, hey.
I was just in chapter 5. Just give us the damn gun, okay? How you boys doing this morning?
We're good. I'm trying to modulate mics here because we got an echo on Tim's side. But let me just do Tim. Sorry, not Tim. Let me do Dell the favor of saying, hey, get his book on Amazon. It's In the Shadow of the Swords. Those are Saddam's cross swords in Iraq. The Baghdad Police Academy. In the Shadow of the Swords, the Baghdad Police Academy. That link is in the bottom of the page. And if you're listening on the podcast side, it'll be in the show notes. By the way, if you want to support the show, go to breakitdownshow.com, grab that PayPal link, put a little bit of money in the pot each month. That will definitely help. All that money goes right back into the show, whether it's equipment or ads or something, a trip. That's how you can support us. Always good on YouTube. If you rate and review, these things are big. So hit that subscribe button. So we started the show off, Tim, talking about Fathers and Sons and how your character was Dell and how you guys named it after DW. Why don't you talk a little bit about that decision that you and Michael Broderick made with that character?
Well, I, at the time, did not even know that the Dell I was playing was named after Dell. And I was honored once Michael told me, because it was coming off of COVID. It was December 1st when we filmed that in Los Angeles. And it was in November, Michael sent me a script that he wrote, which was good. And then a week later, sent me another one with an updated script written by a Navy veteran and Vernon Mortensen, who's a Swift boat guy. And it got even better and developed the characters even better. And the characters are based on, as we all know, Jack Carr's characters from the Criminalist series. And it was one of those most motivating things for me coming off of COVID and having 2020 being one of those years of, as an actor, kind of a wash for pretty much every actor out there, and producer and director and writer. Everything was just shut down. And it was that bright little light at the end of the year. And Michael Broderick, I love the fact that he had, I think he quoted Joseph Campbell when he said, I we're sitting around doing nothing. He goes, I just wanted to be proactive, and I wanted to create a project. And I wanted to create it based on Jack Carr's books and characters. And he goes, this is what I've come up with. And it all rounded about if you've read the terminal list, it starts off with a Darcy Eccles rifle, which is a very high-priced, hard to get, very much sought after. People wait years to have one custom built for them. I think the cheapest one is about 14 grand, and they go up to, up to 30 and 40 grand depending on what they're having done. And that's how that starts. And so Michael created this great storyline about how the Darcy Eccles came to be, and came to be gifted to James Reese. So, and at the time I had not read any of James's books, the James Reese novels. So I read the Terminal List, and it was it really made sense to me. But the characters were of a military background, much like you guys. I'll say they were salty guys that had been in. These guys had been in the teams and the Navy SEALs specifically, and it was sort of just a world weary sense of the characters. And Michael's character played James Reese's dad, who kind of like you guys. He's kind of reminds me of your background, because he started off being a SEAL and then turns to being a spook with the CIA and doing all those covert type operations. And that was really the storyline. And again, I didn't know too much going into it, but it just felt so comfortable. It was well written, well directed by Ryan Curtis, an Army veteran. Michael was so up to speed and could answer any question I had about the series. We learned about the Watch, learned about how that played into it, learned about James Reese, and it really made sense just based on the characters, just based on the writing. And it's kind of this sense of, Michael's a warrior, has put himself out there, and now his son's following in his footsteps, which a lot of us like to think of our sons and daughters following in our footsteps. But now it's that worry that a father has, that perhaps my son is going to go to war and not come back, or not come back the same. And it's all my fault because I'm the one that he's modeled his life after. So it really resonated. And I mean, the final product was just wonderful.
Del, what did you think of it, Del?
I thought it was. I mean, I shared it with a lot of friends, and then I had a lot of people saying, "When's the movie coming? I want to see this." They were very very interested in seeing more, as I am. I think it was it was just really done well, and both Tim and Michael, and I can't the young lady's name, I can't remember her name now, but they just interacted so well. Tyne, they all three interacted so well together, and even though hers was a smaller part, she looked so comfortable in that role, and and her interactions with him that were really really good. And like I said, I'd love to see more. I thought it was a just really really well done, and I have to say I'm flattered that they chose my name, not necessarily one of those Hollywood names.
Yeah,
I had to say too.
I love it too. It had some real genuine. It was genuine. I mean, look, Tim knows how to act. He's a ranger. He knows exactly what he's bringing to the page, and obviously Michael does too. But it was fantastic. And if you guys aren't aware yet, Jack Carr is going to be on the show on Thursday. We have Michael Broderick co-hosting that one, so we'll be talking even more about this topic. And it's funny, Jack Carr should be paying me for all I'm talking about his stuff, but we love his work. Tim, Del and I were talking about some of the ins and outs of some spycraft stuff, since we both have done that kind of work. And I wanted to push that conversation. I want to ask one more question on that, and then we can let you ask some questions. But Del, when you talk about counterterrorism, someone like Timothy McVeigh blows up over 100 buildings, kills a bunch of people, doesn't use a gun at all. And we often get wrapped up around a gun as a tool or a means, but you and I both know you can get a U-Haul truck and the right amount of manure and some fairly not as simple as it used to be, but if you're diligent and you're patient, you can acquire all the things you need to make something much more horrible than what any rifle could ever do. What keeps you up at night as a counter-terror guy when you're in the field working? Like, what do you like? I know what it does. I know what it is for me, but what is it for you, Del?
Well, I know a lot of the things that were discovered both in Iraq and then after the invasion, and then also in Afghanistan. And what keeps me awake at night is similar to what we're going through right now with COVID, and that's a biological or chemical weapons attack, because it's something that the capability is out there, and it's deadly, and you can if our enemies in the terrorism business, the Al Qaeda, the ISIS, they certainly are interested in that kind of capability, and would do anything to get their hands on it. The Iranians, though they may not do something overtly themselves, they try their best to keep their fingerprints off of things, but that's not beyond them to work with an organization like Al Qaeda or others, and use them to do their dirty work for them. So those are the things. I mean, we know that they had been doing research in that type of capability, and it certainly hasn't stopped, because the war on terror seems to have winded down a little bit, because we let our guard down, and they are still actively pursuing weapons of mass destruction to use against us.
Do you think we should trust the Chinese that the COVID outbreak came out of the Wuhan wet market, or would you continue to be? I mean, I know, like, until they can prove it emphatically with open international sources, I think that the lab is still in play. But that's how I see things in terms of counter terror and trying to keep us safe. And maybe you don't have an opinion on that, but I figured I would ask.
Oh, I've said from the very start, when this first hit our country, we first started recognizing it for what it was, probably a little over a year ago. I said way back then, I said, I think this was probably something that was being experimented on in the lab, and they lost control of it. They simply lost control of it, and it was, being probably researched as what its lethality potential was, for perhaps a chemical weapons or biological weapons, use, and they just lost control of it. And then it didn't take much to once they tried to cover that up and hide the fact that this was on the loose. It has spread, well, obviously all around the world. So,
Tim, you have any questions for Dell?
No, I 100% concur with both of your opinions about this. And after what happened this past year, I that's the one thing that I think we should definitely fear is a biological weapon, because if this was something that just slipped out accidentally, well, imagine if it was fully weaponized and inserted throughout the world, or if they were just trying to damage us. If they just had agents with that specific biological agent with them and released it through all of our major metropolises, and there's nothing we do about it. You see how it shut down our economy, shut down our country, and still to this day, I mean, I live in Los Angeles, and I'll say they still instill fear in Californians and New York and all these other states that are still locked down, because I don't know why, but that's where we are now. But I think a biological weapon is the weapon of the future that we fear. And it's funny you having Jack on, because that's kind of what his new book's about. And I don't understand why, and maybe you guys can answer this: is why is our government and our agencies, why do they not want to say the World Health Organization as well? Why do they not want to go? What's the fact of this? What's the truth of this? Why can't we get into Wuhan? And why have we allowed them to store so much evidence that could point to how it happened, and also if it did happen intentionally?
I don't know. For the life of me, I mean, I think President Trump was trying to do that. He was basically, describing it, as the China virus and that. But the thing that concerns me more than the origins of this is the fact that I see us letting our guard down. We need to stay on the offensive in this war on terror since 9/11 of 2001. and it's easy for people to get to forget what happened. It's easy for people to get tired of being, on the offensive. But the fact is, we have to stay on the offensive, because if we don't, we're setting ourselves up again for another attack, and this one could be, again, even more deadly than what happened on 9/11 of '01. And so, I'm concerned about that, because I think people are war weary, and the government is not willing to continue the effort that needs to be done. So I think we're in for a rude awakening again if we don't stay on the offensive and do what we've got to do.
Tim, I'm sorry, Dale, I think about these advantages, right? So let's say that this thing does break out of the Wuhan wet market, and it still comes and destroys our confidence in ourselves, our confidence on our experts, our confidence in science. And if I'm my offensive side of my brain thinks, man, if I'm a Chinese guy, if I'm a Russian guy, if I'm, an Iranian dude who's tasked with undermining the stability of the United States, and I'm going to use terrorism to do it, well, hey, thanks for the help. Wake up. I'm gonna leverage the hell out of this and try to. I mean, I would love to see this nation divided in half and ready to fight one another and disagreeing about everything. It's a big boon. How do we deal with it internally? Like, this thing has come and it's divided us, and we're so politically obsessed with our party. We're so partisan that I don't know that it's that hard to be a terrorism guy against the United States and succeed.
No, not at all. And that's one of the reasons why we need to stay on the offensive, and that we need to continue working towards gathering intelligence that hopefully can head off some of these. One of the things I've spent a lot of time overseas, and most recently I was in a Middle Eastern country working with their intel service, and trying to give them an understanding of what's being done to them by our adversaries, their adversaries. And one of the things that is going on all the time is basically covert influence operations. We have covert influence operations being conducted against us, constantly. Chinese, the Iranians, the Russians, they're very effective at it because it's easy. If you look at what happened with the Russia collusion scandal, if you want to call it that occurred back in 2016. As Trump was taking office, we had, and yes, there was some political actions taken, but we had a covert operation against our country to undermine a sitting and duly elected president. There's no doubt in my mind that the Russians, the Chinese, perhaps the Iranians, were leveraging that to every level that they could. It was used that to create dissension, to stir up animosity, to exploit our political differences. That goes on all the time, and they're going to continue to use it because it's very effective.
Tim?
No, I totally concur. It just made me think of the recent meeting in Alaska we had with our dignitaries, with the Chinese dignitaries, and how they made a mockery of our country and said, how dare you mention the Uyghurs and how they're treated by our country when you have such division in your country with BLM riots going on and protests, and it basically shut down our dignitaries from saying anything else. It's like, oh, geez, what do we say? How do we respond to that? And here you have in China, you have these poor Uyghurs being put in the concentration camps, re-education camps, disappearing, and yet we still do business with them, no problem, in our country because of the division. It comes down to, even the election laws in Georgia, which they're the split in our country, the divide is palpable, and it's so easily debunked, but the news and the news cycles keep repeating it and repeating it and repeating it, and then the people that don't do the research just believe it. And so it creates this divide that has been going on. I mean, back since Reagan, we've had this, but it's gotten so much worse now. And all our enemies have exploited that to the maximum. And I don't understand how our Congress and the Senate don't understand that.
Our right now in this country, our law enforcement is under siege. Basically, it's under attack. And we all know that 99.9% of cops out there are just doing a difficult job and doing it the best they can. They're hardworking. Yes, there are, as in any profession, as with the military or with the agency, there are bad eggs, and no one hates a bad cop worse than other cops do, because that individual paints them all with a broad brush and makes their job more difficult. But right now, what's going on in this country is definitely a concerted effort to undermine police, undermine law enforcement, so that they can't do their job, or that they're at the point where they're hesitant to try to do their job anymore, because they look what's happening. They've got politicians in Washington, D.C., well-known members of Congress and the Senate, and that are absolutely crucifying police officers before the facts are even, from an incident are even gathered yet, and before a full investigation has been conducted. So that's what's going on in this country. That's what we're up against, is a concerted effort to undermine authority in this country and undermine the rule of law, and to undermine the authority of our government to protect us and to make the kinds of decisions that need to be made to ensure that we remain a stable nation.
Let me grab these reins here and yank us off the political topic so we can be done with that for a while. And let's talk about your fantastic book, In the Shadows of the Swords, the Baghdad Police Academy. And we're talking about the police. So here's our transition. Why did you write the book? And then what do you think of our efforts to create a better Iraqi police force? I know when I went out, and one of the things I would collect on is how far are the local Iraqis from calling the police? I mean, there's a measure of effect right there, right? Like affect. Can we get the Iraqis to call the police? And the answer where I was at the time I was there was no. Like, they were like below fifth on the list of things they would do in response to a crisis, which again, commanders were desperate to learn this. Be like, what do you mean nobody wants to call the police? But that was the answer. So why write the book and talk a little bit about training police in another country and how challenging that can be?
Well, just from Iraq, I mean, I could tell there's people can look it up on YouTube. There's a hilarious video on YouTube. All you gotta do is type in why Iraq has taken so long. And some of you may have seen it now, but you'll see a soldier, a U.S. soldier, who is conducting PT with a group of Iraqi police cadets. They're doing jumping jacks. If you get a chance, look it up, because it's hilarious. It kind of explains in a nutshell why it was taking so long to try to get the Iraqi police trained. It was a difficult prospect because of when they got rid of, they disbanded the Iraqi police now, because they didn't want any Ba'athist party members in that to have any positions of authority in the new democratic Iraq. And in essence, what they did was they created an insurgency, because all these people who were police officers or military members suddenly were without a job, without any authority that they once had, and they became the kind of the nucleus of an insurgency. And the police training program was, it was, I think, ill-conceived from the very start, because no way are you going to train people in that part of the world, particularly who had lived under a brutal dictatorship for decades, how to be officer friendly. The people weren't going to accept that. We talked earlier about having to develop a level of trust with, between you and the people that you're trying to recruit. Well, in this case, the people that you're trying to serve. There was no level of trust. I mean, the police under Saddam Hussein were brutal, and they were, and they reveled in their brutality. I mean, it was a very coveted job under Saddam, because basically you had a free ticket to do whatever you wanted. So changing that mentality in the community, but also in the potential police recruits, was difficult. They didn't know anything about Western policing methods, and here we were trying to convince them that that this was what they needed to do. So it definitely presented some challenges.
Tim, any questions?
I wonder, because obviously, as human beings and these Iraqi recruits, I mean, they're capable. They have the ability to learn. What is it about their culture, and having had the brutality of Saddam's police, do they not understand what you're trying to teach them in terms of policing techniques that will hopefully keep their country in control? Why are they? I'll say, and I don't mean this about every Iraqi police cadet or officer, but Keystone Cops. What is the issue? What is the problem?
Well, part of the problem was again cultural, religious. An example would be, we did classes on domestic violence, and we're telling police recruits in your class, you might have 25 cadets out there, that people have to report, if someone's beating their wife. Well, if your local imam at the mosque you attend is telling you that it's okay to smack your wife around if she misbehaves, your judgment that she's misbehaved in some way, you can smack her around as long as you don't leave marks on her face, and literally that was being taught over there by some of the religious figures. So here we are trying to tell Iraqi police cadets that that's a crime, when their imam, who has a hell of a lot more authority and more influence than we did, is telling them just the opposite. So that alone was a challenge. So it definitely was, I think, something that a lot of people, when they went into it, when I first got over there, I mean, your eyes were opened to the fact that you've got an uphill fight ahead of you.
I would add to that, because I've seen a lot of these things happen. And actually, this guy right here, I'm going to put him on the screen. This guy, Ali, is my friend. He's from Iraq, and we're getting to know each other. And we talk about the cultural differences all the time. He would love to come to the United States and have another wife. And I'm like, yo, we don't have second wives here, And he's like, but in Islam, you can do that, And so this is the reality. Like, there's nothing wrong with how he thinks, because he's over here in Iraq and that's their normal. And I'm like, okay, well, if you want an American woman, and he's like, I want a Christian wife or an Islamic wife. And I'm like, that doesn't matter here. It doesn't work that way here. And I don't pick some lady out for you. You've got to do that yourself. There's a completely different way they approach life. And when we start off with these, we use the police academy, these police academy 101 basic themes, like don't hit your wife. It doesn't play there because it's just not a reality for them. I went through this whole long, source operation, how you control a conversation, 3-week block of instruction. And at the end of it, the guy's like, but Pete, we will just hook up their balls to electricity, and then we will shock their balls. And I'm like, yeah, well, that's another technique. But I mean, we're
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I tried to talk about more in the book was, believe it or not, the humorous aspects for people. Thanks for people going to, like us. I mean, people who are cops or whatever in the U.S. going to a foreign country like that, and yeah, you're in the middle of a war zone, but I think anybody that's been in the military or has been in police work knows, they've heard about that gallows humor that we all have, and it's true. We did one of the ways that you avoided going crazy, was by finding humor in what you were doing, and that playing practical jokes on each other, which we did a lot of that. We played practical jokes. We told lies and war stories each evening, sitting around a campfire, and that's what I tried to share in the book was some of those humorous aspects of what we were doing over there, because there was a lot of humor. There really was, and people may find that curious that you're in the middle of a war zone and you're laughing about getting martyred and shot at. But I mean, that's the reality. When it's happening at that moment, you're scared to death, right? But after it's over, everybody's laughing about it. I mean, that holy cow, you didn't believe what just happened. I mean, that's just the way that people deal with things like that. And so I tried to express that in the book, to give people a look at us as we were human beings. I mean, we yeah, a lot of us, we'd come from law enforcement backgrounds, but we were human beings, and we found humor in things that happened around us. So
I want to ask you one more real quick spy question, two-part question. One is, I want your best, no shit, there I was, this happened story. And then, would you rather be working at higher levels, having influence with the commands and working, above battalion level or whatever, and trying to support whether it's State Department or whoever it is, or would you rather be outside the wire in the thick of it, but exposed to all the danger and everything else?
threatened to quit. Okay, so I, I had no interest in being in the higher levels or whatever. I mean, outside the wire is the only way to go, really. I mean, if you want to, use it that terminology or whatever. But it's. I mean, you're out there, you're getting your hands dirty. You're out there doing the work, and it doesn't matter. There's no medals involved. There's no accolades or anything like that. It's the self fulfillment that you have from being able to to achieve something that what you did, what your colleagues did in that. And I mean, that's all that really matters. And not much different than what soldiers in the out on the battlefield feel when they've accomplished something. It's you didn't care about medals. You brought your guys back alive. You didn't lose any colleagues, and and you achieved your mission, and that's what mattered more than anything.
And what about your no shit, there I was story?
Well, I can mention this now because it was a long time ago, and but I was in the divided city of Berlin, and I was on the wrong side of the wall, doing something that would have got us in a lot of trouble if we had gotten caught. And I ended up, myself and my colleagues had to dive down an embankment of a little country road when a column of Russian troops were headed our direction. And it was about a 30 or 35 vehicle column, about 2 o'clock in the morning. And we dove down this embankment off the side of the road, right into the worst damn briar sticker patch you ever saw in your life. And we're down there getting stuck like crazy by stickers and thorns and everything. As this column passed us, and it got beyond us, and we were able to extricate ourselves from that predicament. But for the next probably 2 weeks, all of us were pulling thorns and stickers out of our ass. So that was one of those no shit, I was there moments. So.
Tim, you got a final question for Del?
I do. Actually, kind of for both of you guys. What film or TV series that you guys have seen most accurately depicts the work that you guys have done after the military?
From a police standpoint, I loved the old Hill Street Blues series. It had some defects, but all in all, it was a pretty good portrayal of life on the streets. I generally stay away from them just because, my girlfriend Julie, she hates watching anything like that with me because I'll sit there and pick it apart, which I know a lot of people in the military do. I can't. The one movie that was very very good. It was a very accurate portrayal of what happened was Argo, the rescue of the 6 Americans who were hit, hiding out in the Canadian ambassador's residence and how we got him out of the country. It was excellent right up until the end. Then they added some action into it that never happened, just to kind of spice it up a little bit. But it was a very accurate portrayal of what happened on that operation, and just the way that they carried themselves. I think it was Ben Affleck that played the lead character in that, and he walked the walk and and talked the talk, and so he actually did a very good job of portraying David Menendez in that operation that occurred. So anyway, that's my best, I guess, best ones is Hill Street Blues and Argo.
Those are fantastic. I don't know that anyone's got the field collection intelligence guy thing right. They often play that person as being like this soft guy who's mostly brainy. The brainy guys stay back at the head shed and they do analytical things, and which is great because that's what they're great at. The guys like Dell and myself that go out, my KPI is, am I getting shots offered to me during Ramadan from the Iraqi commander? That's what I'm supposed to do, is like build friends. And I've not seen that character played very well, but the Outpost I think is fantastic for the complexity and the danger of the Afghan fight. And it's done really, really well. Scott Eastwood was fantastic in it. I really enjoyed him. And then the other movie I think that did a good job, but I think Hurt Locker got how hot it was right. Like that looked hot. That's exactly what it feels like. He is a character in the modern warfare, like in Iraq. Like it is part of your day-to-day grind. You look at your gear and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm about to put this stuff on. And then there's one other movie I was trying to think. Oh, you know what? The documentary Mosul, and it's fantastic in terms of the modern fight, like what it's like to be shot at in a city. And then the sounds and the visions of it, they really do a good job of that. Like you have to bound across this street, this alley, or like I remember, and you lose track of these things. I remember being in a firefight. When I say that, we were being shot at by someone, and we were trying to deal with the problem. So mostly I'm just kind of stay out of the way, and I'm out of the way. But there are rounds hitting, I don't know, let's say 25 feet from where I'm at, but they're not going to hit me. But I'm in a firefight, and it's like no big deal unless you have to go out that way around that corner. We didn't have to in this case, but I realized later on as like a grown full adult, I'm like, holy shit, I was getting shot at. You never know what's going to happen. You don't know if it's covering fire and someone's running towards you or anything can happen. But Mosul does a great job of capturing that. And then also the lack of humanity in the ISIS fight. And then what the Iraqis had to do as they tried to deal with that day-to-day fight. It's fantastic for that. So those are my answers.
I do have to tell this real quick story of playing wiffle ball at the Baghdad Police Academy, and I had a shutout going into the fifth inning, and all of a sudden we came under mortar attack. After the mortars were over, we resumed our game, and I immediately gave up 6 runs. So the damn insurgents threw my arm all out of whack,
These are real things. Well, listen, I appreciate you coming on, and Tim, I appreciate you hanging out with us. It was fun. Everybody should get Dell's book, In the Shadow of the Swords, the Baghdad Police Academy. You can get that on Amazon for sure. If you're in the police game or training, you need to get that book. Tim's holding a copy of it up. Dell has been a wonderful guest. I'm going to run this clip here. Stand by, fellas. Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank